It all began with a sound. Not a scream, not a slam door, but the sharp, splintering crack of a wine bottle on the floor. It was like a gunshot in the oppressive silence of our kitchen, a space that once held the scent of morning coffee and laughter, now just a stage for our ruin. The crimson liquid, a Cabernet Sauvignon I'd been saving for an anniversary we would not celebrate, bled across the white marble. It pooled and spread, a wound on the pristine surface of our home, seeping into the grout lines like a confession. Jack stumbled back, a pathetic caricature of the man I'd married. His Pima cotton polo shirt, a gift for his 35th birthday, was wrinkled, and there, on the collar, was a smear of burgundy lipstick, not my shade, as brazen as a signed confession. His eyes were wide and lost, his face puffy from alcohol and the corrosive effect of lies. I stood rigid by the counter, my body a column of ice. My navy blue blazer was still crisp from a long day at the office, a thin armor against the inferno raging within me. My eyes burned, but I would not cry. I was done with tears. In my hand, I clutched my weapon, a crumpled motel receipt, balled into an undeniable sphere of proof. The date on it? Today. My voice, when it came, trembled, not with sadness, but with a pure, cold rage that had been simmering for months. You didn't even bother to hide it this time, Jack? A motel? Really? A laugh, brittle and sharp, escaped my lips, the sheer banality of it. Not a boutique hotel, not a secret romantic getaway. A cheap, roadside motel with polyester sheets and the smell of stale smoke baked into the walls. Is that all I was worth? His mouth opened, a dry, rasping sound escaping, but no words formed. Instead, he knocked over a dining chair, the crash echoing our collapse, another percussive note in the symphony of our undoing. I threw the receipt at him. It was too light to be a projectile. It fluttered to the floor like a dying leaf, coming to rest in the spreading pool of wine. 3 years, my voice cracked, my control finally fracturing. For 3 years, I have carried us, my job, my savings, my sanity. And you're out there screwing some... I couldn't finish the word. It tasted like acid in my mouth. It's not what you think, Luce, I swear, he cut in, his voice desperate, a pathetic plea. My laugh this time was hollow and bitter. Don't. Just don't. I turned away, gripping the edge of the granite countertop, my knuckles white. I needed something solid to hold onto, convinced I might otherwise disintegrate. Jack's eyes flickered to the front door, then back to me. An escape route. He was always looking for an escape route. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked, a sound of mundane suburban life, oblivious to the storm raging inside our home. You're trying, Lucy, he pleaded, his voice soft, attempting to wield the old charm that had once undone me. You know I'm trying. I spun back to face him, my features twisted with a disgust so profound it felt like a physical pain. Trying? You haven't worked in 2 years, Jack. You live off of me. And now this? Who is she? His silence was the loudest, most damning answer of all. A flicker of guilt crossed his eyes, but beneath it, I saw something else. Defiance, as if to say, what are you going to do about it? And then he made his choice. He snatched his jacket from the sofa, a decisive act that ended all debate. He was leaving. If you walk out that door, I shouted, my voice echoing in the hollow space he was creating, don't ever come back. The door slammed shut behind him, a final violent punctuation. I was left alone in my kitchen, the wine soaking through my stockings, cold and sticky against my skin. A question hung in the toxic air. How did we get here? And what happens when a man with nothing left to lose keeps digging his own grave? My mind, a traitor, couldn't stop itself from rewinding. An image surfaced, sharp and painful. Jack, clean-shaving, his smile brilliant, laughing with his buddies over beers. He was the life of the party, tossing back shots, flirting with a waitress half his age. He was vibrant, charismatic, reckless. His phone buzzed on the table, my name, Lucy, glowing on the screen. I remember the call, just checking in, asking if he wanted me to save him dinner. He glanced at it and ignored it. turning to order another round. Under the neon lights, his white gold wedding band glinted, a cold flash of a forgotten promise. I didn't know it then, of course, but now I could picture him perfectly. Jack walking into the darkness, his breath forming small clouds in the cold air. In the distance, a neon motel sign glowed, a beacon of his betrayal. It called to him like a siren song, promising an escape from the wreckage of his own failures. The question remained, boring into my soul. Why does a man destroy the one thing keeping him afloat? Why would he set fire to his own lifeboat? That night, I didn't clean up the mess. I left the shattered glass and the drying wine on the floor, a monument to our ending. I went upstairs, walked into the bathroom, and stared at my face in the mirror. I didn't recognize the woman looking back. Her eyes were hollow. There were lines around her mouth that hadn't been there before. I had spent 3 years trying to keep a drowning man's head above water, and I realized, with a horrifying clarity, he had been pulling me down with him.
After Jack left, the silence of the house became a physical presence, heavy and suffocating. Sleep was an impossibility. How could it be otherwise? Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of a wind against the windows sounded like his returning footsteps. But he didn't come back. I spent the night on the living room sofa, curled under a wool throw, but the chill wasn't from the air. It was in my bones. I replayed the fight in my head, dissecting every word, every look. The defiance in his eyes as he left, that's what haunted me. It wasn't remorse, it was resentment, as if I had somehow failed him. The morning sun was cruel and unforgiving, illuminating the wreckage in the kitchen. The shards of glass glittered like broken diamonds. The wine had dried to a dark, ugly stain, looking even more like blood than before. With a sigh that felt like it came from the depths of my soul, I got the broom and dustpan. As I swept up the remains of my marriage, I felt a strange numbness. Not grief, not yet, but a profound exhaustion, the kind you feel after fighting a war for too long and have finally laid down your arms. I didn't call him, I didn't text. A foolish part of me still expected an apology, an explanation, anything. My phone remained silent. I know now, though I could only dimly suspect it then, that he drove his beat-up sedan directly to the address on the receipt, to the parking lot of a seedy motel where long-haul trucks idled through the night and the curtains never quite closed. And she was there, waiting for him. Mia. I didn't even know her name then. To me, she was a phantom, a concept. But later, as the ugly pieces of the story began to slot into place, I could picture her. Late 20s, bold and sharp in tight jeans and a leather jacket. Not a naive victim. She was leaning against a doorframe, smoking a cigarette, looking entirely at ease. Entirely in control. I can almost hear her voice, light but edged with steel, teasing him. Thought you'd chicken out after that fight. And Jack, my husband, would have forced a grin. Not a chance. You're my escape, Mia. I imagine them kissing. A rushed, reckless kiss, devoid of tenderness, fueled only by desperation. Even in that moment, I know Jack's eyes would have betrayed his unease. This wasn't love. This was self-destruction. And then the motel room door would have closed, shutting them away from the world. Meanwhile, my world kept turning. I went to the office, a gleaming tower of glass and steel where everything was orderly and logical. I'm a financial analyst. I work with numbers, spreadsheets, projections. I loved my job for its certainty. Numbers don't lie. They don't cheat. They don't make promises they can't keep. I sat at my desk, trying to focus on a profit and loss statement, but the figures swam before my eyes, blurring into meaningless black and white. You okay, Luce? It was Sarah, my colleague and closest friend. She stood by my desk, holding 2 cups of coffee, offering one to me. She has a natural warmth and a radar for when something is wrong. You look like you haven't slept, she said, her voice laced with concern. I forced a smile that felt more like a grimace. Just numbers. They don't lie, right? I took the coffee, my hands trembling slightly. The warmth of the ceramic mug was a small comfort. No, but the people behind them do, she replied gently, her eyes searching mine. I said nothing. I didn't have to. She knew about Jack's struggles, about him losing his job 2 years ago, about the slow downward spiral of his spirit since then. She had listened to me for hours, offering advice I rarely took. Just then, a ping from my computer, an email notification, a bank alert. I had set them up months ago to track unusual transactions. Transaction alert. A cash withdrawal of $300 has been made from your joint checking account. My jaw tightened. $300. Another $300 vanished into thin air. Money I had worked for, money that should have been for our mortgage, for our future, was now likely paying for that motel room, for her dinner, for his drinks. The betrayal wasn't just physical, it was financial. It was a violation of trust on every conceivable level. And while I was staring at the screen, a wave of nausea rolling in my stomach, Jack was waking up next to her. Morning light pierced the cheap curtains, striping his face. Mia, I can picture, was already sitting up, scrolling through her phone, utterly unbothered by the weight of what they had done. You gonna tell her about us or keep playing house? I can hear her casual tone. To her, this was a game. It's complicated, he would have said, rubbing his face. His standard answer for everything. Lucy is all I've got. And that's when I know Mia would have laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. Then why are you here? It was a good question. One Jack had no answer for. He would just pull on his wrinkled polo shirt, the lipstick stain on the collar now a glaring mark of shame, a silent accusation he would carry home. But he wasn't coming home. Not yet. That day at the office passed in a fog. I performed my duties on autopilot, my mind elsewhere, trapped in a loop of anger, hurt, and disbelief. Driving home, I felt a knot of dread tighten in my chest. What would I find? An empty house? Or worse, Jack there, trying to act as if nothing had happened. He was there, sitting on the living room sofa, the same sofa where we had spent countless nights watching movies and talking. A nearly empty bottle of whiskey stood on the coffee table beside him. He looked up as I entered, his eyes bloodshot and swollen. He began, his voice hoarse. I didn't answer. I walked straight to the kitchen, where the wine stain on the floor served as a stark reminder. I poured myself a glass of wine, filling it to the brim. I needed it. I returned to the living room and sat in the armchair opposite him, creating a safe distance between us. He said, "We need to talk." "I don't think we have anything left to say," I replied, my voice ice. The silence stretched. Finally, my phone buzzed on the table. A text message from Jack, though he was sitting 10 feet away. "I'm sorry. Can we talk?" It was absurd. He couldn't say the words aloud, so he texted them. That was Jack, always taking the easy way out, the cowardly path. I picked up my phone, my thumbs hovering over the screen, composing a furious reply. Sorry for what, Jack? For cheating or for getting caught? But then I deleted it. Another fight would solve nothing. Instead, I put the phone down and called the one person I knew would understand. I called Sarah. "Hello?" "It's me," I said quietly, walking into the bedroom and closing the door. "He's home." "Oh God, Luce, are you okay? What did he say?" "Nothing much. He's just sitting there, drunk." I took a deep, shuddering breath, and then the words tumbled out, a whispered confession. "I found a receipt, Sarah. A motel. He's cheating on me." Saying it aloud made it real, and a single tear finally escaped, tracing a hot path down my cheek. "Oh, Luce." Her voice was a wave of sympathy. "What are you going to do?" I glanced around our bedroom. On the nightstand sat a photo. Jack and I on our wedding day. Younger, happier, full of impossible hope. We were smiling, Jack's grin so wide and genuine. Where had that man gone? I confessed to Sarah, my voice breaking. I really don't know. While I was confronting the ruins of my life, Jack, I would later learn, was making a feeble attempt to piece his part back together. The next day, he put on his only suit, one I'd bought him for an interview 2 years ago, an interview that went nowhere, and went to a job fair at a suburban convention center. I can picture the scene vividly, the air thick with the smell of desperation and cheap coffee. He would have wandered from booth to booth handing out his outdated resume. The easy charm he once used to get anything he wanted now looked forced and tired. He told me about one particular encounter. A recruiter from a logistics firm, a stern-faced woman, scanned his resume, her brow furrowed. "A 2-year gap in employment?" she asked, her voice flat. Jack's smile faltered. "Figuring things out," he said. The woman was unimpressed. She handed the resume back to him. "Good luck," she said, a polite dismissal. He left the job fair, the weight of his failure pressing down on him. He didn't call me. He didn't come home to face me. Instead, he pulled out his phone and sent a text to her, to Mia. "Need to see you." Because facing the truth of his own inadequacy was too hard, escaping into the arms of another woman, one who knew nothing, or so he thought, of his shortcomings, was so much easier. It was a pattern. Every time life got hard, every time he had to face the consequences of his choices, he ran. He had run from his career, he had run from his responsibilities, and now he was running from our marriage. The problem was, he was always running toward something worse. I didn't learn about Jack's next meeting with Mia until weeks later, during a long night of bitter confessions and drunken tears. But when he told me, another piece of the ugly puzzle clicked into place. It changed everything. I had thought Mia was just a cheap affair, a symptom of Jack's midlife crisis. I was wrong. She was so much more than that. She was intentional. After leaving the job fair, rejected and feeling worthless, Jack didn't come home. He drove to Mia's apartment. From his description, it was a small but stylish place, clean and organized, a stark contrast to the chaos of his life. It made him feel like he was stepping into the life of someone who had it all together. He sat on her couch, nursing a beer, while Mia paced the room, her energy restless and sharp. "You're not leaving her, are you?" she asked, her question a direct hit, no preamble. Jack sighed, a weary sound. "I can't. She's everything." He said these words to Mia, while I was at home wondering if my marriage could be salvaged. The irony was a physical pain. Mia stopped pacing and turned to face him, her eyes cold and appraising. "Then why are you here, Jack? You think I'm just some side piece?" "No, of course not," he stammered. "You're important to me, Mia." "How important?" she challenged, and then she played her hand. She walked to a bookshelf, retrieved a small box, and opened it. She pulled out a photograph and tossed it onto the coffee table in front of him. It was a picture of Jack and her, taken at some bar, probably weeks before. They were laughing, their heads close together, looking intimate and carefree. Jack was holding a drink, and Mia's arm was linked through his. It was the kind of photo a happy couple would take. "I have dozens of these," Mia said, her voice like steel. "Screenshots of your texts, recordings of our calls. What do you think would happen if Lucy saw them?" Jack froze. The blood in his veins turned to ice. This was no longer a simple, messy affair. This was a trap. He had walked right into it, blinded by his own vanity and desperation. "What do you want?" Jack asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I want you to be serious," she said, her tone sharp. "I'm not going to be your dirty little secret forever. You either sort things out with her and commit to me, or I'll sort things out for you." It was then I realized, as Jack recounted the story to me, that Mia wasn't a distraction. She was a predator. She had seen Jack's weakness, his desperation, and she had exploited it for her own ends. She wasn't a lover. She was a calculating player in a game I didn't even know I was in. Jack left Mia's apartment that night, not with the illicit thrill of an affair, but with the dead weight of blackmail hanging over him. He was trapped, caught between the wife he was betraying and the mistress who was extorting him. He had dug himself into a hole, and now the walls were caving in. And in his cowardice, he did nothing. He just let the hole get deeper, foolishly hoping that it would somehow, magically, go away. But things like this never go away. They only grow until they consume everything. The weeks that followed were a quiet torture. Jack existed in our house like a ghost. He slept on the sofa. We moved around each other in a tense silence, exchanging only the most necessary words about bills and chores. He made a show of being penitent, doing odd jobs around the house, buying me flowers, which I left to wilt in their vase. I was living in limbo, torn between 3 years of history and the stark betrayal in front of me. A part of me wanted to believe him, to believe it was a one-time mistake, that we could fix this. I had loved this man. I had built a life with him. The thought of throwing it all away was terrifying. But the numbers, as always, didn't lie. One Tuesday evening, I was at the dining table, going through our finances. It was a chore I had taken over when Jack lost his job. He could never face it. He could never face the reality of our financial state. And then I saw it. The credit card statement, Jack's name at the top. I scanned the charges, grocery store, gas station, and then Sunset Glow Motel, $89.99. Starlight Inn, $95. Crossroads Motel, $79.50. A woman, nature, sad. Not one, multiple charges, stretching back for months. The rage I had been trying to suppress erupted, hot and volcanic. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a lifestyle, a pattern of deceit. His whole "I'm trying" narrative was a lie. I waited for him to come home. He walked in an hour later, his eyes still red-rimmed, the faint smell of beer on him. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. My voice, when I spoke, was level and dead, which was far more frightening. I sat at the kitchen table, the credit card statement spread out before me like an indictment. "How many times, Jack?" I asked, not looking up. He stopped in the doorway. "What are you talking about?" "These motels," I said, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. "How many times?" He looked at the statement and all the pretense fell away from his face, leaving a gray mask of defeat. He slumped into the chair opposite me, as if his legs could no longer support him. "It's not about you, Luce," he whispered. I'm lost." I let out a dry, hollow laugh. "Lost? I'm the one paying for you to be lost." I stood up and walked to the drawer in the living room where we kept important documents. I had called a lawyer last week, just to explore my options. The lawyer had emailed me the paperwork. I had printed it. I returned to the kitchen and laid it on the table in front of him. Divorce papers. Jack's eyes widened. Panic finally cut through his alcoholic haze. This was real. This wasn't another fight he could smooth over with empty promises. "Luce, please!" His voice broke. For the first time in weeks, I saw a genuine emotion in his eyes. Fear. "I'll change, I swear. I'll do anything." I shook my head, a deep, heavy sadness settling in my chest. "It's too late, Jack." I gestured to the papers. "You already chose." He stared at the papers, then at me, his face a contorted mass of desperation and disbelief. "You can't do this. After everything we've been through?" "It's because of everything we've been through that I have to do this. I can't keep paying for your mistakes, not financially and not emotionally." It was the final straw. The last wall of my denial had crumbled, and all that remained was the cold, hard truth. He hadn't just cheated on me once, he had been living a double life on my dime. Twist 2. Jack's secret. I thought the divorce was the bottom. I thought infidelity was his greatest sin. Once again, I was wrong. There was another layer of deceit, a deeper, darker one that I was about to uncover. That night, after I gave him the divorce papers, Jack shattered. He didn't leave. He sat at the kitchen table for hours, alternating between sobbing pleas and desperate silence. And in that drunken, desperate state, the truth began to leak out. He had gone to see Mia, not to end it, but to beg. He told her about the divorce papers, about how he was going to lose everything. He needed her to destroy the photos, to give him a chance to fix things. And that's when he confessed everything. First to her, and then to me. It turned out the infidelity wasn't only the story. The real problem, the cancer that had been eating away at his life, was gambling. It had started innocently. He said small online poker games to kill time after he lost his job. Then it escalated to high-stakes games in the back rooms of bars, places where other desperate men gathered under clouds of cigarette smoke. He was losing. Badly. The cash withdrawals from our joint account, they weren't all for Mia. Most were to pay off gambling debts, to chase his losses in one more hand. The motel charges on the credit card statement, some were for Mia, but the others, that's where the poker games were held. He wasn't sleeping with another woman every time. He was gambling away our future. "I didn't know how to stop Luce," he sobbed, his face in his hands. "It just got bigger and bigger, and the more I tried to get out, the deeper I sunk." I listened, feeling nothing but a cold revulsion. He wasn't just a cheater. He was a gambling addict, a liar who had built a castle of deceit around us. Everything had been a lie. His unemployment wasn't just bad luck. It was him spending his days chasing losses instead of looking for work. His distance wasn't just depression. It was the weight of his secrets. He told me about his confrontation with Mia that night. He had confessed it all, hoping for sympathy. He didn't get it. "You're in deep, Jack," Mia had told him, her eyes narrowing, calculating. "And I'm not your ATM." She wasn't interested in his troubles. They were just more leverage. She handed him an envelope. Inside were the photos of them together. "Fix this," she had commanded. "Get your wife to take back the divorce, get your finances in order, or Lucy gets this." Jack's world had completely crumbled. He was being blackmailed by his mistress, who now knew his greatest weakness. He wasn't just a cheater. He was a liar, a gambling addict, a fool caught in a mess entirely of his own making. And me? I sat there, listening to his confession, and felt as though the floor had vanished from beneath my feet. The man I married didn't exist. He was an illusion, and I had been living in it for 3 years. The pain of romantic betrayal was acute, but the realization that my entire life had been financed by a web of addiction and lies, That was 1,000,000 times worse. This was no longer about saving my marriage. This was about saving myself. The discovery of Jack's gambling addiction was the point of no return. It obliterated any lingering doubt, any fragile hope that we could be fixed. This was no longer about love or forgiveness. It was about survival. I could not let him pull me down with him. The next day at the office, I felt like a different person. A cold resolve had settled within me. During my lunch break, my boss, a man named David, called me into his office. "Lucy," he began, "I wanted to talk to you about an opportunity. Our head of analytics in the New York office is retiring. The position is open. I think you'd be a perfect fit."
New York, a city hundreds of miles away, a clean slate, a chance to leave all this wreckage behind. I hesitated, but only for a moment. A conditioned reflex. What about Jack? The thought flickered, an echo of the woman I used to be. David seemed to sense my hesitation. "It's a big step up, I know. More pay, more responsibility. Think about it." I left his office, my mind spinning. That evening, I went for drinks with Sarah and told her everything. The divorce papers, the gambling, the New York offer. "What is there to even think about?" Sarah said, her voice firm. "This is your lifeboat, Lucy. You don't owe him anything. He has made his choices over and over again. Now it's time for you to make yours. Go." Looking at my friend's worried but resolute face, I knew she was right. I had spent too many years putting Jack's needs before my own. It was time to be selfish. I nodded, not just to her, but to myself. I'm going. Meanwhile, Jack was making his last, desperate play to control the narrative. He confronted Mia at their usual motel. I know this, because later, in his final, pathetic breakdown, he recounted every ugly detail. He begged her to destroy the photos. He offered her money he didn't have. Mia just laughed, and that's when she revealed her final, venomous trump card, the real motive behind their entire affair. "Did you really think this was about you, Jack?" she sneered. She told him about high school. It turned out Mia and I had gone to the same school. I barely remembered her, a quiet girl a few years below me, but she remembered me. She remembered me as the cheer captain, the prom queen, the girl who seemed to have it all. She had harbored a quiet, simmering resentment for over a decade. When she'd run into Jack at a bar a few months ago, she recognized him from my social media photos, and a vicious little plan formed in her mind. Seducing her old rival's husband? Destroying her perfect life? It was the ultimate revenge. "You were just a tool, Jack," she'd said, her voice dripping venom, "to knock Lucy Harris off her pedestal." Rage finally erupted in Jack. His desperation curdled into fury, not at himself, but at the woman who had so cruelly manipulated him. He snatched the photos from her hand and tore them into tiny pieces. Mia didn't flinch. She just laughed, a cold, victorious sound. "You think those are the only copies? You fool." Jack left, utterly defeated. He had been played by everyone. He had lost his wife, his money, and now realized even his affair was an elaborate sham designed to destroy him. He had nowhere left to go but home, to face the final music. I had spent the day packing, not everything, just the things that mattered. My clothes, my books, photos of my parents, small mementos from my life before Jack. Every item placed in a box was a step away from the woman I had been. The house echoed with the ghosts of what we used to be. When Jack returned, I was in the living room, taping a box shut. The air was heavy with unspoken words. The divorce papers sat on the dining room table where I had left them, my signature clear and firm on the bottom line. He looked at the boxes, then at me. The devastation in his eyes was real. For the first time, there was no artifice, no excuse, just raw, ugly truth. I screwed up, Luce. His voice broke. The gambling, Mia, all of it. I'm so sorry. The apology was too little too late. It was like putting a Band-Aid on a mortal wound. I looked at him, and to my surprise, I felt no anger. The rage had burned itself out, leaving only an empty sort of pity. He looked so small, so pathetic. "You're not my problem anymore, Jack," I said, my voice soft but final. I told him about New York, about the new job, about leaving at the end of the week. I saw the last of the hope die in his eyes. He begged me to stay, making hollow promises about changing, about getting help, but I had heard those words before. I loved you, and it was the truth, but I love myself more.
I walked to the table and picked up another piece of paper, a bank statement, my personal savings account. I handed it to him. He looked at it and the color drained from his face. The number at the bottom was near 0. That's what was left after I paid off your credit card debts and covered the overdraft from our joint account. That is the price of your lies. He stared at the paper, the reality of the financial ruin he had caused finally sinking in, and then, as if the night weren't dramatic enough, the doorbell rang. We both started. Jack looked at me, bewildered. I shrugged and went to the door. It was Mia. She stood on our doorstep, wearing a tight black dress, a smirk on her face. She didn't look at me. She looked past me, at Jack. "Thought you should see this," she said, her voice sweet as poison. In her hand was a small black USB drive. She pushed past me, uninvited, and walked straight to the smart TV in our living room. With a few clicks, she plugged it in. "Mia, don't," Jack pleaded, his voice choked with panic. But it was too late. A video flickered to life on the screen. It was grainy, clearly shot on a phone. Jack, at a poker table in a dimly lit room, surrounded by grim-faced men. He looked tense, sweat beading on his forehead. We watched as he pushed a large stack of chips into the center of the table. We watched as his opponent revealed his hand, and we watched as Jack's face crumpled in defeat. Thousands of dollars, our money, gone in an instant. The next video was another clip, Jack and Mia in a bar, kissing, another of them entering the motel room. I stood there, watching the irrefutable proof of his dual betrayals, and I felt nothing. A profound numbness. It was as if I was watching a film about someone else's life. The pain had been so absolute that it had cauterized itself, leaving only scar tissue. Jack, however, fell apart. He collapsed onto the floor, great racking sobs shaking his body, the agonizing cries of a man who had truly lost everything. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply picked up the remote and turned off the TV, plunging the room back into silence. I turned to Mia, who was standing there, a victorious glint in her eye. "Did you get what you wanted?" I asked, my voice cold. Her smirk faltered slightly, perhaps disappointed by my lack of hysterics. I didn't waste another word on her. I simply pointed to the door. "Get out of my house," I said, my voice low and imbued with a power I didn't know I possessed. Mia, realizing her drama was over, shrugged and sauntered out, her victory tasting of ash. Jack looked up from the floor, tears and snot streaking his face. "Loose." "Go, Jack," I said, the finality in my tone leaving no room for argument. He got to his feet, a broken man, and for the second time walked out that door. This time, I knew it was for good. The door clicked shut. I stood alone in the middle of the boxes of my new life, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. 6 months later. My apartment in Manhattan is small, but it's mine. From my living room window, I can see the city skyline, a glittering tapestry of a million lights, a million lives. I'm unpacking the last box, one filled with books. The smell of old paper and ink fills the air. I am alone, but I am not lonely. I feel alive. The new job is challenging, the city is vibrant, and I am starting over. My phone buzzes, a text from Sarah. "Proud of you." I smile. A real one. Miles away, in a small town I left behind, Jack is wiping down a bar. He's a bartender now. His face is hollow, the old, charming smile gone, replaced by a permanent weariness. He is sober. He is trying, one day at a time, to rebuild something from the wreckage. A female customer flirts with him, but he just nods politely and turns away. On his finger, where his wedding ring used to be, there is only a pale strip of skin. I found my strength by leaving a man who chose weakness. Jack, I hope, is facing his demons, one day at a time. Sometimes, the hardest choice is to let go of love, of lies, of the person you thought you were. But in that choice, you find yourself.